Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into some really practical stuff from Raymond Yang's notes. Stuff about rental housing, asset management, specifically looking at a situation that, well, it probably happens more often than you'd think.
Yeah, it's a scenario lots of renters could face. Something gets damaged, there's an agreement about fixing it, but then things get messy over the damaged item itself.
Exactly. So let's paint the picture. This is straight from the notes. You're renting a place, it's got decent furniture, pretty new actually, and then, whoops, you accidentally damaged the sofa.
Right, and the key here is it's not just normal wear and tear. The notes say it's due to personal factors.
Mm-hmm.
So an accident, basically. The sofa's damaged, maybe visibly, but it's still usable.
Okay, so you do the right thing, you talk to the landlord, you both agree, just verbally, mind you, that you'll make it right by paying for a completely new sofa.
And the notes even give a figure, around NT $12,000, which probably reflects the original sofa's cost or replacement value.
Sounds okay so far. Responsible tenant, landlord agrees on the compensation method. But then comes the twist. You're ready to pay up for the new one, and you ask, reasonably enough, hey, can I take the old damaged sofa away once the new one's here?
And the landlord says no, flat out refuses, says they have other uses for the damaged one.
Which brings us right to the core problem, doesn't it? If you're paying for a new replacement, who actually owns the old damaged one? Is the landlord allowed to keep it?
It's the central puzzle. And like you said, the source material really flags the big issue.
Yeah.
Everything important was agreed on verbally.
Yeah, proving exactly what was said later on. That's tough. So our mission today is to unpack this specific case using the notes, understand the legal ideas involved, and, crucially, figure out the practical steps you, as the tenant, could actually take here.
Okay, let's start where the source does with your basic responsibility as a tenant. There's a principle in Taiwan's Civil Code, Article 432 is often cited, basically saying you need to look after the rental property like a good manager.
Right, treat it with care, essentially, like it's valuable even though it's not yours.
Exactly. So if damage happens because of something other than normal, use these personal factors, well, you haven't quite met that duty. That makes you liable for the damage.
And by agreeing to pay for a new sofa, you're basically acknowledging that liability.
Pretty much, yeah. So the debate isn't whether you compensate, it's about how that compensation plays out, and specifically what happens to the original sofa.
Okay, so let's look at that agreement. I'll pay for a brand new sofa. What is that, legally speaking?
Well, the notes suggest it's likely something called dation in payment. It's a specific legal concept.
Station in payment. Okay, what does that mean in, like, plain English for this sofa problem?
It basically means you owed something, maybe money for the damage or the cost of repairing the old sofa. Instead of fulfilling that specific obligation, you offered something different, a brand new sofa.
Ah, substitution.
Right. And when the landlord accepts that new sofa, your original debt or obligation for the damage is considered settled, done, extinguished.
Okay, so providing the new sofa squares things away regarding the damage claim.
Correct. But here's a really important point the source raises. The law about dation and payment, Civil Code Article 319, it doesn't actually say who gets the original damaged item.
Oh, so it settles the debt but doesn't automatically transfer ownership of the old sofa to me just because I bought the new one.
Exactly. That specific question, who owns the old sofa now, isn't answered by the dation and payment rule itself. We need to look at other legal principles for that.
Right, this is where it gets tricky. The landlord owned it first. Damaging it doesn't make it mine. Paying compensation doesn't automatically mean I bought the broken thing.
That's the general starting point, yeah. Ownership stays put unless something specific changes it, like a sale or a clear agreement. So if your verbal agreement was only, I'll provide a new sofa, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was mentioned about the old one.
Then the landlord could argue they keep their damaged property and get the new one as compensation.
They could certainly try. They'd say, I owned it, it's still mine, just damaged. You compensated my loss with the new sofa.
But wait, if I'm giving them a brand new sofa, haven't I completely made them whole for the loss of the old one? Getting the new one plus keeping the old one, which they even admit has other uses, doesn't that feel like they're getting more than they lost?
That's precisely the counterargument, and it touches on a fundamental legal idea. Compensation should make the injured party whole, restore them to their previous position, but it shouldn't let them profit from the damage.
Right, no windfall.
Exactly. It's often called preventing undue enrichment or unjust enrichment. Getting a brand new sofa fully covers the loss of the old sofa's value and function.
Yeah.
If the landlord also keeps the old one, which clearly has some leftover value if it has other uses, they're arguably being compensated twice. Once with the new item, and again with the value of the old item.
That really does sound like double dipping. Is there a specific law that tackles this kind of situation?
Yes, there is. And this is a really key piece highlighted in the source material. Civil Code, Article 218-1.
Article 218-1. Okay, what does that do?
It essentially gives the person who caused the damage and paid compensation, that's you, the tenant, the right to ask the person who received the compensation, the landlord, to transfer ownership of the damaged item.
So because I paid compensation equivalent to its loss or damage in this case, by providing a whole new sofa.
Precisely. You've effectively paid for the full value. Therefore, Article 218.1 gives you a strong legal argument to say, okay, since I fully compensated you for this sofa's value with a new one, I should now get the damaged original.
And the whole point of this article is to stop that double benefit situation.
Exactly that. It prevents the landlord from getting full compensation and keeping the item that still has some residual value. The fact the landlord mentioned other uses actually strengthens your case under 218.1 because it confirms the old sofa isn't worthless.
Okay, that's a very powerful point. Article 218-1 seems tailor-made for this. But we keep coming back to the big problem.
The verbal agreement. Yep.
The source confirms oral agreements are generally valid in Taiwan, right? For rentals, too.
Yes, legally binding. No general requirement for writing under the civil code for this kind of thing.
But proving it.
That's the hurdle. Civil procedure law puts the burden of proof on the person making the claim. So if you claim the verbal agreement included you taking the old sofa, or even if you're just relying on the Article 218.1 right after providing the new sofa, you need to establish the facts.
And without a recording or a text or a witness?
It's tough. It becomes a he said, she said situation. If there's no clear proof about what was agreed regarding the old sofa, a court might just default to landlord was the original owner. Even though Article 218.1 gives you that right after you compensate fully, the lack of clear evidence about the whole interaction makes things messy.
So, okay, let's get practical. Based on Raymond Yang's notes, what can you, the tenant, actually do in this messy situation?
Right, practical steps. First things first, and this is absolutely key. Evidence hunt. Go back through everything. Texts, line messages, emails, any notes you jotted down.
Look for anything related to the sofa.
Anything. Even if it just confirms, I agree to pay for a new sofa. That piece alone is huge because it establishes you provided the full compensation needed to trigger your rights under Article 218.1. Even if it doesn't mention taking the old one, proving you paid for a new one is critical. Also, was anyone else there when you talked to the landlord? A witness.
Okay, gather all potential evidence. Step 2.
Communicate. Talk to the landlord again, calmly. Explain your understanding. You agreed to compensate with a new sofa, you've done or are doing that, and now you believe you're entitled to the old one.
And this is where you bring up the legal stuff.
Yes, but politely. Mention the principle of avoiding undue enrichment. You can specifically reference Civil Code Article 218-1. Explain that since you provided a new sofa, the law supports you requesting the old one to prevent them getting that double benefit, especially since they said it has other uses.
Frame it as fair and based on the law, not just what you want.
Exactly. Then be ready to negotiate. Your main goal is to take the old sofa, citing your compensation in Article 218-1. But what if they dig their heels in?
Okay, plan B.
Could you negotiate a reduction in the payment? If they absolutely insist on keeping the old sofa with its residual value, maybe you don't pay the full NT $12,000 for the new one. Reduce the amount to reflect the value they're keeping.
That makes sense. If they keep value, you pay less.
It aligns with the no undue enrichment idea. If talking directly fails, the source suggests mediation. Many local government offices have mediation committees. It's less formal, less costly than court.
What about actually suing? Is that realistic?
It's an option, yes. But the notes give a reality check. Lawsuits cost time and money, potentially more than the old sofa is even worth. And remember, the burden of proof for that verbal agreement, it's still a challenge.
Although proving you paid for the new sofa helps with the Article 218-1 claim.
It definitely helps establish the basis for the Article 218-1 claim, yes. But winning overall still depends on the total picture and evidence. It's a calculated risk.
And the source gives a big warning.
A huge one. Do not just go and take the old sofa yourself, even if you think you're legally right.
Why not?
Because taking it without permission could open you up to accusations of theft or other legal trouble. it could make things much worse. Stick to the proper channels: negotiation, mediation, or, if you must, the legal system.
So, looking back at this whole scenario, what's the big lesson for renters?
Get it in writing. That's the main takeaway. Any important agreement about repairs, damage, money changing hands, who gets what, try to get some kind of written confirmation.
Even just a quick text.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A simple text or line message saying, okay, confirmed, I'll pay for the new sofa, or ideally, okay, I'll get the new sofa and I'll take the old one, provides vital proof if things go sideways later.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Your position as the tenant, you're liable for the damage. You agreed to compensate with the new sofa, that's the deduction in payment.
Correct. And while the landlord owned the sofa originally, the fact that you're providing a new one as full compensation gives you a strong claim to the old one under Civil Code Article 218-1.
Because the landlord shouldn't get a double benefit, the new sofa and the old one's remaining value.
Exactly. Their refusal to let you take the old one after getting full compensation via the new one is legally questionable because of Article 218-1.
But, and it's a big but, actually getting that old sofa or maybe money back for its value really depends on proving the situation. Finding evidence of the agreement, or at least proving you paid for the new sofa to trigger 218-1.
That's the crux of it. Your practical path involves digging for evidence, clearly stating your case, using the law, like 218-1, trying to negotiate fairly, maybe mediation, and definitely learning the lesson about written agreements for next time.
It's definitely not simple, but the notes provide a good roadmap for tackling it.
Yeah, and it's interesting how something so common, like paying for something you broke, bumps up against these legal rules about ownership, compensation, and preventing unfair gains. That gut feeling of, hey, I paid for the replacement, the old one's mine now, actually has some legal backing in Article 218-1.
But the whole thing can unravel just because the initial agreement wasn't jotted down in a text or email. Amazing how a lack of simple documentation can turn a straightforward fix into a legal headache over, an old sofa.
It's a really potent reminder, isn't it? Clarity and documentation matter, even in what seem like simple, informal agreements.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into the specific rental scenario using those valuable insights from Raymond Yang's notes.
We really hope breaking down this example helps you understand the legal side and, more importantly, the practical steps you can take if you ever face something similar with property damage in a rental.
Definitely. If this was helpful, do leave us a comment, let us know what you thought, or maybe suggest other tricky situations you'd like us to dive into.
Yeah.
Please subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive.